What if I told you there's a boot many consider to be the finest hiking boot ever made? A boot with a 2-year waiting list. A boot with a 100-year history. A boot available in one color and one color only, black. This is Limmer Boots. Get yourself comfortable, maybe get yourself a snack, because we're going to do a deep dive into one of my favorite boot brands ever, and that's Limmer Boots out of Intervale, New Hampshire. Now, this video is done in collaboration with Michael from the Iron Snail, and just a little note on that. I've been a fan of Michael's for a long time, and he's one of the few examples of the guy that you see in his videos is the same guy he is in real life. He's really just a good dude. I really enjoyed spending time with him, and we kind of have a little bit of a two parts of a whole thing going on here. So if you're watching this video first, please go and check his out after, because he has a whole different story to tell on Limmer Boots. And if you're here from his video, then thank you and welcome. Anyway, let's get into it. Peter Limmer Sr. was born into a shoemaking family in the small Bavarian town of Peterskirchen. I think I said that right. He earned his master bootmaker certificate in 1921. Peter moved to Boston, Massachusetts 100 years ago in 1926, where he began making custom footwear and ski boots.
So, yeah, long before where they were making hiking boots that we all know and love today, it was the dress shoes and ski boots.
And these were the first patented ski boots in North America.
Peter moved to the White Mountains of New Hampshire in 1950, where he continued to make bespoke footwear. In 1970, Limmer & Sons coordinated with Meindl of Germany to produce an off-the-shelf boot known as the Standard, a partnership that still continues today. In 1995, cousins Peter and Carl Limmer carry on the bootmaking tradition until 2021, when Adam Lane Olson and Chris Sawyer purchased the business.
Yeah, so I grew up in northern Michigan, and it was a wonderful place to grow up. I then went to college in Minnesota. As a kind of a stroke of luck, my wife had a friend that was living up in the White Mountain area here up in Mount Washington Valley, and called my wife and said, I'm leaving a job up here that you should look into. So at that point, we got on a plane and came up to visit Mount Washington Valley for the first time in the spring. And before she ever even had an interview, we just looked at the valley around us and just decided that we had to figure out a way to move up here. And I found a job listed for an assistant branch manager at a local bank. So I cut my hair, shaved my beard, bought a suit for the first time, and jumped on a plane to come interview for it. I got the job. I met a lot of great people in the community and met Pete Limmer. He walked into the branch one day. He'd left the shop to make his deposits, and he forgot to take off his tape measure. So he walks in, and I'm like, finally, Pete, I hadn't figured out what he did yet. I hadn't asked him. I'm like, Pete, what do you do? What's with the tape measure? It's like, oh, I build hiking boots. So over the next, course, the next few months, I started to chat with Pete a little bit more, and just a gregarious guy, great to talk to. Finally, I came up here one day, up to the shop with a colleague of mine, a business banking colleague, to talk about business products and see how we could help him out. We didn't really talk about that, but we started talking about retirement plans and exit strategy for the shop. And at one point, he just said, well, I don't really know what's going to happen. My sons aren't really interested in coming in to work with me here. Maybe just someday I'll just have to close the door. In the car on the way back to the to the bank, my colleague and I just kind of looked at each other and thought, wow, that's a shame. There's so much history, so much legacy, such this loyal customer base, and obviously beautiful product. But about a week later, it kind of dawned on me well, I'm sort of handy. Maybe I'm clever enough to figure out how to make a pair of boots. So I came up here on a Friday afternoon one day. I said, Pete, remember that conversation we had a week or so ago? Would you be interested to talk to me about coming in with the intention of working for you to learn how to build boots, how you run the business, with the plan of taking over when you want to retire? And he looked at me like I was insane. And that was about it. I left. I kind of killed the conversation at that point. About a week later, he came into my office at the bank, walked in, he kind of closed the door and looked around. Were you serious about that? Sure was, Pete. I need a change like this. I think it would be a good fit. With nothing more than a handshake that, both of our intentions were to, to work together with the handoff, the business at the end of it. When he was ready, we shook hands and I walked away from the bank.
My name is Chris Sawyer, and I run the stock side of the Limmer boot operations. And I first learned about our boots in a Backpacker magazine article in February of 2000 at my parents' house in Albemarle, North Carolina. I'd burned through a couple pairs of polyurethane glued-on boots. I would send Peter and Carl Limmer business from other people who would see my boots when I was working as a ranger. People had questions about them. You got to call these guys, they're up in New Hampshire. In 2014, I came to the shop to meet Pete for the first time to be measured for my custom boots. And then 2 years later, I came into the shop and I met Adam. He had been working for Pete for a couple months, and it was like, you know, in coming into the shop over the years and calling Pete, you always wonder, like, you know, what's gonna happen? And now here's this guy, and it's like, you know what? This could be the guy who's gonna run this part of the business. And so he and I were in communication for a number of years, and then when I purchased a pair of boots for my brother in 2019 from Carl Limmer on the stock side of the business, you know, Carl told my brother that he was going to be selling his part of the business and that Pete was going to sell his business, and that the Limmer name and company that they shared together was going to be sold as well. I was working with Carl, Adam was working with Pete, and you know, basically our commitment to trying to make sure that the Limmer name and boot lives on with the same quality and legacy and care that it has for over 100 years is maintained and carried forward, and in a way that is meaningful to people.
Now, I first found Limmer in my never-ending quest to find the best of the best boots, and when I first went to their website, I thought maybe they went out of business, because to say it was archaic is an understatement, but it only took a couple of emails to finally understand that they were still in business and to get on their wait list. Now, Limmer tends to do things the traditional way. For example, they send letters in the mail letting you know that you were on the wait list, your number's coming up, and it's time to go to Intervale to get your measurements. And honestly, you don't have to twist my arm to go to New Hampshire. I love it up there. It is one of the most majestic, beautiful states, just gorgeous. And so I went, I got measured, and a little while later, my customs arrived in the mail. When my boots arrived, I was struck by the heft and density as I took them out of the box. Now, I've worn plenty of Pacific Northwest work boots in my time, and the Limmers are every bit as solid as those. The upper pattern is cut from a single piece of leather. This traditional style not only makes the boot more water resistant, but more flexible as well. It's joined by 6 rows of stitching at your foot's arch, aiding in Limmer's legendary supportive feel. The leather is 3.2 millimeter chrome tanned from Seidel. Now, while I love vegetable tanned leather, chrome tan makes a lot more sense here, being that it's more water resistant and more flexible out of the box. The heel counter is 8 or 9 ounce veg tanned leather, and there's a steel shank beneath the 12 ounce veg tanned insole.
So in our boots, you know, there's what's called a heel counter. You can see it on this red boot. You know, there's just like this external shape of that heel counter, and it, you know, holds a lot of stiffness on the exterior of the foot, as well as up through the arch. But the real stiffness in that boot, in our current hiking boots, comes from a heel counter. And in the, you know, again, the custom boot, it's going to be, you know, it's a piece of veg tan that's going to sit in between the lining leather and the upper leather, you know, in very similar construction in the stock boot, but that comes up all the way through, you know, into the arch. And not only is it the heel counter, which provides ample, you know, stiffness as it gets shaped into it, you also see this seam here, and fold that in to where that seam gets created on the inside of that boot. So that doubles up, you know, just one more layer of leather that gets then pulled up into the arch around the foot.
Limmer offers the custom boots with different midsoles depending on your needs, but I went with a single leather midsole. The sole is a Vibram Montagna, offering excellent grip on most terrain, and the padded tongue is fully gusseted. Now, I went through that kind of quickly, and there are a few construction details that I want to point out. First is that the Limmer guys made every effort to make sure that your heel gets as low and far back as possible. You can see that pocket there, and what this does is make your foot a lot more stable and less prone to rolling your ankle on steep terrain or tricky trails.
Over the past several years, we've worked on the stock side to kind of mirror more of the heel pocket that is in the custom boots. And so we've increased the foam density and improve the spacing. And so basically, you know, we want your foot to sit way down in that heel pocket. You know, what this does also is it provides lateral support and stiffness up from the side of the boot.
At the front of the boot is a hard toe. It's not leather, and as somebody who's extolled the virtues of all leather construction for years, I was kind of on the fence about this, but this is actually made to your foot. So when they create the last based on your measurements, they actually take a piece of material that's wet and then hardens up over time and lay it over the top of your last. That means they're not using a stock toe cap that's gonna, rub against your pinky or whatever. This is also custom made to your foot. And that really helps if you're going off trail or whatever, but I've been using these at work and they have been awesome. There are two things I want to point out about the stitch down construction on this. The first thing is, look how tidy and nicely cropped that is. I mean, there's no wasted space here at all. That thing is nice and close, and on some Pacific Northwest boots, you get this big welt shelf that sticks out that kind of looks like a duck or something. This is as close and tidy as I've ever seen.
So the width of this heel on either side of your foot, where your foot is, there's an 1/8 inch plus of that welt, plus the multiple layers of that outer leather, lining leather, and that heel counter before your foot is. So your foot is well inside like all of that material. So the stability that you get from that construction is unlike most others out there. So the construction on the boots offers, a lot of modern boots have a 270-degree welt. And our boots offer a 360-degree welt. In this case on the custom boots, it's all a 360-degree stitch down, which creates a lot of durability. So there's and a lot of water resistance. So there's no moisture that can get, into that upper of the boot above the welt. So a Goodyear welt is great for a lot of reasons, but it does not offer the most waterproof seal out there. So when these boots are, assembled, everything is glued and stitched. We have an incredibly watertight seal all the way around the boot.
The other thing is that beneath the stitching there, you can see that there's a little extra piece of leather. This acts as kind of a gasket between the stitching and the upper leather here. So that way, over time, when you're, putting a lot of strain on that, it's not damaging the leather beneath that, which adds to more resoleability in the future. Think of it as like a washer with a nut and bolt. This just evenly distributes all that force and puts less strain on one specific spot. This is one of the little tiny things of many different elements that make Limmer boots what they are. Overall, the break-in on the custom Limmers wasn't too bad, and I attribute this to two things. The first is that padding, which makes it very comfortable. Now that's some pretty dense padding. It's not just like, carpet underlayment. This is some memory foam. It's really thick, really dense, but also very comfortable. The other thing is that since they're made to your foot, all you really have to do is loosen up the leather near your toe and near the ankle, and that takes a little bit of working in and something that only comes from wearing them. The only spot that I noticed a little bit of discomfort and some rubbing that took a little bit of time to get used to is right in the back of the heel where it kind of contacts the back of your heel. That just took a little while to sort of soften up and beat down, and after a little while, they were just fine. But I would be hesitant of putting these on and then just going right out for like a 3-day hike. You may want to spend some time with them first. Now, I wanted to show you in-use stuff of me hiking some trails around here and stuff, but unfortunately, I had a work injury, and I actually was wearing my Limmer boots when it happened. A highway sign, fell off a truck, striking me in the ankle, breaking my fibula, shattering a bunch of stuff in my ankle. And so that put me out of commission for a few months. But I gotta tell you, the fact that there was so much padding in that upper, I have nothing to compare it to, and this is just me guessing, but I'll bet you the injury would have been worse if I didn't have all that cushion around my ankle. Why do you always bring me the crappiest ball? Now, my first pair of Limmer boots was actually the Hiker, which is a low-top hiking type shoe. This thing has been great. I've brought it to Montana. It's been with me for a long time. It is the shoe that I will wear when things get really hot and I don't want to wear something that's taller. But in front of me here, I have the Standard and I have the Custom. And you may be looking at these two boots and thinking they're very similar and maybe having a hard time deciding which one you're going to get. So I want to tell you a little bit of the differences between them, what I've noticed, and maybe it'll lead you into, which one's better for you. The Standard is less expensive than the Custom, of course. It doesn't require you to have a custom last made and make a trip to Intervale, New Hampshire, although I recommend it. And this may be a great choice for you. Let me tell you what, it is heavy. I mean, it's got some serious heft to it. It's also very stiff. I mean, now I can bend most boots, but this with its full length shank is very, very stiff.
One of the differences in the stock and the custom boots is the shank. There's going to be a steel shank with 2 layers of midsole in the custom boots. We use a 35% fiberglass, 65% nylon shank that's very stiff and rigid, that's going to go the full length of the boot. One of the differences between the standard and the lightweight is when you're breaking in the shank with the rocker sole, it just makes it easier. You know, you just have a better approach angle on the ground to kind of tip off the toe. It just makes breaking the shank in easier. When you're breaking the shank in with a Montagna, it's, you know, you have a pair of these.
Yeah.
It's a stout thing.
Oh yeah.
But it will get there, and when you have a broken in shank, and typically, you know, these guys will, when they're resoling a boot, they'll shave it down just a smidge, and they'll put on a brand new Montagna sole. And to me, that is my favorite iteration of the boots, is fresh resole, broken in shank, shaved just a hair, and you get that sticky Vibram rubber. It is, when you're out doing whatever you're doing, you just feel like you can do anything.
This was actually the first time that I ever felt like maybe I'm not up to what these boots are capable of. These are like driving an H1 Hummer down the road. I use it for day hikes. I use it for work occasionally, and I just feel like I am not doing nearly what these boots are capable of. So the standard is probably, if you're looking for a really, really robust, durable hiking boot, these in the correct size are gonna be all you need. The break-in on the standard was a different story than the customs. Now again, they're not custom fit, so you have a lot more leather that needs to move out of the way and conform to your foot. I would say that these were among the most challenging break-ins I've ever had to go through. However, after a while, and I'm talking 1 or 2 months, they started to feel a lot better. Now, if I had the choice between the standard and my customs, I'm going with the customs all day long. But if I had, you know, a real need for that rigidity that you get from that full-length shank, the standard is a great option. So if you're like me, you're saying, okay, great, there's all these options, but which one should I get? Well, luckily I asked the guys at Limmer this exact question.
So we start to kind of like, you know, ask those like qualifying questions, and then if it's something that they need them today, then it's all right, great. We have this like great line of like stock boots that, depending on that use case scenario, if it's something that you're going to use a lot, do a lot of, you know, work in, you know, run hard, it's that standard weight boot. If it's something that somebody gets out, you know, occasionally, still gets out, you know, and hikes a lot, but maybe not quite as frequently, or, you know, quite as, you know, hard going, or as, then we talk about like, you know, either that lightweight or that ultralight. And some of those also just depend on like the fit, either because that also is going to come into play. Each boot has their own like fit, like nuances that we that ultimately want to look at. You know, and then in some cases, like, okay, well, we've got really hard to fit feet, and which can be a little bit, you know, challenging in some of the, you know, for some folks trying to get into a pair of stock boots. And I think that's when like we really start talking about like, you know, the custom boot. I think this is like a good example of somebody that has a really challenging foot shape that, you know, trying to fit into a stock boot may or may not like be the right option for them.
We do build these boots on 5 different lasts. We don't build every boot on 5 different lasts, but you know, this is the ultralight. It's built on the historic Limmer last, which is what the standard was made on. You know, has been made on since 1970, and so this is going to be a little bit lower volume for people with like you know, we have people with like a B width foot that will fit very well in this boot. We also make the standard on the Limmer last and 4 other lasts as well. The lightweight is built on one called the Extreme 1, Extreme 2, and so you're going to have a little bit more foot volume in the front of the boot. And so even though this is not a custom boot, when it does kind of squish out and conform to your foot, you know, we can kind of press out the toe here. I call it doing boot CPR, just to kind of exacerbate the break-in for people who want a little bit more space. But what we're really looking for is we're going to fit for volume in through the arch, which is where, you know, our #1 objective is to have your heel jam-packed to the back of this boot into the heel pocket. And, you know, that is our objective for your foot, to the back of the boot and as low as to the ground as possible.
I think it's really important to discuss Limmer boot culture, and this is something that Michael talks about in his video as well. Chris and Adam have done a wonderful job of paying homage to the past and Peter Limmer and those that came before them with Limmer boots. But they've also harnessed that very loyal customer base that Limmer has and even expanded on it. So they've created Limmerfest, which is an annual festival that they do hikes, they do shop tours, they do all kinds of stuff. And it's just a way of celebrating the brand and the people who make it. Matter of fact, when I was there at the shop and I was filming the stuff that you're seeing here, people were coming in just to say hello, all wearing their Limmers and, coming off of a trail or whatever. And it was just sort of a stop on their way. And Adam would stop and talk to them. And it was nice to see that it is this tight-knit little community. And this is one of those boot brands that isn't loud. I mean, I think I told you that, I thought that they were going out of business when I first checked out their website. They're a boot brand that if you know, you know. Even the Limmer workshop itself is practically dripping with Limmer culture. I mean, you open the old wooden door, these ancient cowbells are ringing, you walk across the creaky floor that has had thousands, probably millions of steps on it, and every surface you can look at is covered in either pictures of people who have sent in, pictures of them and whoever wearing their boots on some crazy hike somewhere, scaling some mountain. Everywhere, on the ceiling, on the rafters, on the walls, letters from people who have, thanking Limmer that, they gave them boots that got them through this crazy adventure. And you walk in and it's hard to not be overwhelmed by the amount of stuff that has come before you. And it almost feels like an initiation when you go to Intervale and you get measured and you become part of this family that has had such a history in it. People who have scaled mountains that I could only dream of. And like I mentioned, I'm going to wear them on my day hikes, so it's a little bit humbling. And along with all that cool memorabilia was also the most wild pair of hobnailed boots I've ever seen.
So this is a pair of 1938-39 mountaineering boot. So this is very early on in, before the sole technology of Vibram would have made it to the States. These could even predate that a little bit. We're not sure exactly on the year. But this tread pattern, which is a hobnail, so you can see the hobnails, around the edge. You can see that shank is broken through that leather sole, but it's all been pegged as well as stitched. And it's that hobnail pattern is very similar to that Vibram sole that would have come out shortly afterwards. So there's some Limmer lore that claims that the original Vibram tread pattern is based on this.
You could get yourself a pair of custom Limmers and completely miss the point. And I think a lot of people who collect boots do end up missing the point a lot of times. These are for creating your own adventures. They're for getting out and spending time with the people you love the most. And maybe even making friends that you didn't know you had yet, just by getting out there. It's written on terribly decorated kitchens across the United States, but it's not the journey, it's the friends you make along the way. And I'm lucky enough to have made some friends in Adam and Chris and Michael while making this video. And yeah, the boots are great, but truly it's the friendships that you remember. So get out there and create some of your own adventures. Limmer Boots will definitely help you do that. I'll catch you next time.